Queen Naira watched Earth's defenses crumble through the crystalline viewport of her command ship, her iridescent scales shifting from deep purple to brilliant azure with satisfaction. The humans had fought bravely, foolishly, against her superior forces, but like all lesser species, they would bow before the might of the Caraxian Empire. Your Majesty, the humans' orbital defense grid has been neutralized, Commander Vex reported, his metallic armor reflecting the ethereal light of their bioorganic ship. Their military command centers are requesting terms of surrender. Naira's silver eyes narrowed as she studied the blue planet below. How disappointing. I expected more from a species that had managed to spread across their solar system so quickly. Her voice carried the weight of millennia, each word precisely measured and amplified by her natural royal resonance. The victory had been too easy. 3 months of strategic warfare had brought humanity to its knees, their primitive weapons barely scratching the quantum-hardened hulls of her warships. Yet something about these humans intrigued her, their tactical adaptability, their desperate creativity in the face of overwhelming odds. It was almost admirable. "Bring me their most capable warrior," she commanded. "I wish to understand what drives these creatures to resist even when defeat is certain." Hours later, she stood in her private observation chamber as the guards brought in a captured human soldier. James Harrison, according to their intelligence, had led a small team that had managed to disable one of her destroyer-class vessels before being captured. He stood tall despite his restraints, his green eyes meeting her gaze without the usual fear her presence inspired in lesser beings. "You're smaller than I expected," he said, earning shocked gasps from her guards. No one had dared speak to Queen Naira so casually in centuries. Instead of anger, Naira felt amusement ripple through her crystalline neural network. "And you're either braver or more foolish than your species average." She circled him slowly, noting his composed stance. "Tell me, James Harrison, how did your tiny team manage to breach my destroyer's defenses?" "Superior training," he replied simply, tracking her movement without turning his head. "Superior." Naira laughed, the sound causing the chamber's living walls to pulse with light. "Your species is barely out of its evolutionary infancy. Your technology is primitive, your body's fragile, your lifespan's insignificant. Yet here I am," Harrison countered, "still standing, still fighting." Naira paused her circling, genuinely intrigued. Most species cowered before her, overwhelmed by the pheromones her kind naturally emitted to establish dominance. This human seemed almost immune to their effect. "Your resistance is admirable, but futile," she said, activating the chamber's holographic displays to show the ongoing occupation of Earth. "Your world belongs to the Empire now. Your people will serve as another testament to Caraxian superiority." Harrison's eyes followed the strategic displays with analytical precision. "If we're so inferior, why study us at all? Why not simply eliminate humanity entirely?" The question caught Naira off guard. It was the logical solution, one she had implemented on other worlds that proved too troublesome to subjugate. Yet something held her back from giving that order for Earth. "Perhaps you serve as an interesting case study in primitive resilience," she deflected, though the answer felt hollow even to her. "Or perhaps," Harrison suggested, his voice dropping lower, "you recognize something in us that your empire lacks. Adaptability, innovation, the drive to exceed our limitations." Naira's scales rippled with irritation, but she couldn't dismiss his words entirely. In 3,000 years of conquest, few species had managed to damage even her smallest vessels, let alone disable a destroyer. These humans were different, dangerous in their unpredictability. "You mistake scientific curiosity for admiration," she said, though she found herself drawing closer to him, studying the determination in his features. "Your species fascinates me precisely because of its flaws, its chaotic approach to evolution." "Then study me," Harrison challenged, stepping forward despite his restraints. "Not through your displays and data, but through real interaction. You might learn more than you expect." The guards moved to force him back, but Naira raised a hand to stop them. In millennia of rule, no being had dared to challenge her so directly. The prudent response would be to have him executed immediately. Instead, she found herself considering his proposal. "You volunteer yourself for closer examination?" she asked, her royal resonance carrying a note of curiosity. "I offer an exchange," he corrected. "You learn about humanity's true strength, and I learn about the empire that thinks itself so superior. Fair trade, wouldn't you say?" Naira's scales shifted to a deep violet as she contemplated this unprecedented situation. The logical part of her mind screamed that this was beneath her dignity as queen. Yet the scientist in her, the part that had driven the empire's evolution for thousands of years, saw an opportunity for unique research. "Very well, James Harrison," she decided, surprising even herself. "You will be transferred to my private research facility. We shall see what insights your primitive species can offer." As the guards led him away, Naira turned back to the viewport, watching Earth's lights glimmer below. She had conquered countless worlds, subjugated innumerable species, yet something about this human's defiant spirit resonated with a long-dormant part of her being. Perhaps this experiment would prove more enlightening than she anticipated. Little did she know, this decision would alter not just her own destiny, but the future of both their species forever. The research facility orbiting Jupiter's moon, Europa, hummed with bioorganic energy as Queen Naira prepared for another session with her human subject. 3 weeks had passed since she'd begun her examination of James Harrison, and each interaction left her more intrigued than the last. "Your neural patterns are fascinating," she observed, studying the holographic display of his brain activity. "They show remarkable plasticity, adapting to new situations far more quickly than expected for such a young species." Harrison sat comfortably in the examination chair, no longer requiring restraints. His initial defiance had evolved into something more complex, a challenging respect that both irritated and attracted her. "We had to adapt," he replied, watching as she manipulated the neural imaging controls with elegant movements of her scaled hands. "Earth isn't as forgiving as your empire's carefully terraformed worlds. We learn to survive by changing ourselves rather than changing our environment." Naira's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue-green. "Yet you've begun terraforming Mars, attempting to reshape it to your needs." "Because we learned we could," Harrison said, his eyes following her as she circled the examination platform. "Humans don't accept limitations easily. We see boundaries as challenges to overcome." The Queen paused, considering his words. In 3,000 years of rule, she had encountered countless species, but none that viewed the universe quite like humans did. Where others saw impossible barriers, humans saw opportunities for growth. "Show me," she found herself saying, deactivating the examination protocols. "Show me how humans learn." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "You want me to teach you?" "Consider it a practical demonstration of human adaptability," Naira replied, trying to maintain her royal distance despite her growing curiosity. What followed challenged everything she thought she knew about inferior species. Harrison taught her human games, chess, which demonstrated strategic thinking in ways her war simulations never had. Dancing, which proved humans could achieve surprising grace despite their limited physical form. And most intriguingly, storytelling. "Your histories are all facts and figures," he explained one evening as they stood before the facility's massive viewport, watching Jupiter's storm swirl below. "Humans remember through stories, through emotional connections to events. Emotions cloud judgment," Naira stated, though with less conviction than she once had. "They lead to unpredictable behavior, chaos. They also lead to breakthrough moments, to innovations your logical approach might never consider," Harrison countered. "Tell me, Your Majesty, what emotion are you feeling right now?" Naira's scales rippled with unexpected patterns, color she hadn't displayed since her youth. "I don't experience emotions as your species does. I observe, I analyze, I decide." "Yet your scales tell a different story," he said softly, daring to step closer than protocol allowed. They shift colors with your moods, betraying feelings you won't acknowledge. She should have punished such presumption. Instead, she found herself studying her reflection in the viewport's surface, watching the iridescent patterns playing across her scales. Were these the emotional indicators he spoke of? Had she been experiencing feelings all along without recognizing them? Perhaps, she admitted, there are aspects of existence I have not fully explored. Their sessions continued, evolving from formal examinations into genuine exchanges of knowledge. Harrison taught her about human art, music, and literature, concepts the Empire had dismissed as primitive distractions. In return, she shared insights into Caraxian science and philosophy that no human had ever been privy to. The facility's staff watched with growing concern as their queen spent more time with the human, her behavior becoming increasingly unpredictable. She laughed, actually laughed, at his jokes, her royal resonance harmonizing with his deeper chuckle in ways that made the living walls pulse with sympathetic light. "You're changing," Harrison observed one day as they reviewed tactical simulations together, their shoulders nearly touching as they leaned over the holographic display. "I am evolving," Naira corrected, though she couldn't deny the truth in his words. "Your species has proven more instructive than anticipated. Is that all we are to you?" he asked, turning to face her fully. A scientific curiosity. The question stirred something deep within her crystalline neural network, and sensation she couldn't quite classify. "You are," she began, then stopped, searching for words that wouldn't compromise her royal dignity. "Unique. Your species, and you in particular, challenge my understanding of evolution itself." Harrison's hand moved slowly, deliberately, until his fingers barely brushed against her scaled arm. The contact sent electrical impulses racing through her biological circuitry, awakening nerve endings she hadn't known existed. "Perhaps," he suggested, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper, "some things aren't meant to be understood through pure analysis." Naira knew she should withdraw, should maintain the distance required by 3,000 years of royal protocol. Instead, she found herself leaning closer, her scales shifting to colors she had no name for. "Show me," she whispered back, surprising them both with the vulnerability in her royal resonance. The kiss that followed defied every law of imperial conduct, every principle of evolutionary hierarchy she had ever known. His warm lips pressed against her cooler ones, and for the first time in millennia, Queen Naira of the Caraxian Empire stopped analyzing and simply felt. The facility's living walls pulsed with unprecedented patterns as their species' differences melted away in a moment of pure connection. Neither of them noticed the subtle changes beginning in Naira's biology, the way her crystalline neural network began adapting and evolving in response to this new experience. As they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Harrison smiled that confident smile that had first caught her attention. "Still think humans are primitive?" Naira's scales rippled with colors of dawn. "Perhaps," she admitted, "it is time for the Empire to evolve beyond its own limitations." Neither of them could have known then how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how their unprecedented connection would soon challenge the very foundations of both their civilizations. The first signs were subtle. Queen Naira's scales began emitting bioluminescent patterns that none of her medical staff had seen before. Her crystalline neural network pulsed with unprecedented energy signatures, and her telepathic abilities fluctuated in ways that defied 3,000 years of recorded Caraxian biology. "Impossible," the chief medical officer whispered, studying the results of her latest examination. "Your Majesty, your cellular structure is evolving." Naira lay on the examination platform, watching the holographic display of her altered biology, with scientific fascination warring against growing concern. At the center of the image, a small cluster of cells pulsed with hybrid energy, part Caraxian, part human. "Explain," she commanded, though her royal resonance wavered slightly. "You carry a child, Your Majesty," the medical officer said, his scales pale with shock. "A hybrid entity that should not be possible by any known law of genetics." The news rippled through Naira's consciousness like a quantum shockwave. In 3,000 years of careful genetic selection, she had never successfully conceived. The Empire's greatest geneticists had tried and failed to produce an heir to continue her evolutionary line. Yet now, after mere months of contact with a supposedly inferior species, "Where is Harrison?" she demanded, rising from the platform with imperial grace despite her inner turmoil. "The human has been confined to his quarters since the first anomalous readings appeared," the medical officer reported. "Standard quarantine protocol." "Bring him to me," Naira interrupted. "Now." When Harrison entered her private chambers 20 minutes later, his confident stride faltered at the sight of her altered appearance. Her scales rippled with colors he had never seen before, and her usually perfect posture showed signs of strain. "Something's changed," he said, instinctively moving closer despite the guards' attempts to maintain protocol. Naira dismissed the guards with a gesture, waiting until they were alone before speaking. "Our interaction has had unexpected consequences." She activated a holographic display of her medical scan, watching his face as understanding dawned. "That's..." Harrison stepped closer to the display, his scientific training allowing him to grasp the implications quickly. "We created life. Together. How is that even possible?" "It should not be," Naira admitted, her hand unconsciously moving to her abdomen where the hybrid child grew. "My species reproduces through carefully controlled genetic recombination. Natural conception hasn't occurred in millennia." Harrison's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of wonder and concern. "Yet here we are, defying the impossible again." He reached for her hand, and she allowed the contact, finding strange comfort in his warm touch. "Are you all right?" The question caught her off guard. In 3,000 years, no one had ever asked about her personal well-being. She was the queen, the living embodiment of Caraxian evolution. Her comfort was irrelevant to the Empire's needs. "I am uncertain," she admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. "This entity, this child, represents an evolutionary leap that threatens everything my empire stands for. Pure bloodlines, controlled advancement, genetic superiority. Or," Harrison suggested gently, "it represents exactly what humanity could teach your empire: adaptation, innovation, the strength that comes from diversity." Before Naira could respond, another wave of biological changes surged through her system. Her telepathic abilities, already enhanced by the pregnancy, suddenly connected with Harrison's consciousness in ways she had never experienced before. Images flooded her mind. His memories of Earth, his hopes for peace between their species, his growing feelings for her that transcended mere scientific curiosity. "The child," she gasped, steadying herself against him. "It's creating a telepathic bridge between us. I can feel everything," Harrison finished, holding her closer as shared sensations flowed between them. "I feel it too. Your dedication to your people, your secret doubts about the Empire's path, your fear of losing control." They stood there, locked in both physical and mental embrace, as their shared consciousness adjusted to this new reality. Through their connection, Naira experienced emotions with a clarity that 3,000 years of imperial distance had never allowed. Joy, fear, love, human concepts that suddenly made perfect sense. "The Empire will not accept this," she said finally, her scales shifting through complex patterns of concern. "A hybrid heir, born of natural conception with a conquered species, some will see it as contamination of the royal bloodline. Then we'll face that challenge together," Harrison replied with characteristic human determination. "This child is a bridge between our species, proof that evolution doesn't have to mean isolation and control." As if responding to his words, the hybrid entity pulsed with renewed energy, sending waves of sensation through both of them. Through their telepathic connection, they shared the experience of their child's first conscious thoughts, a fascinating blend of Caraxian crystalline logic and human emotional awareness. "It's beautiful," Naira whispered, her royal resonance carrying genuine wonder. I never knew creation could be like this. So unpredictable, so alive. That's the gift humanity could offer your empire, Harrison said softly. Not submission to your control, but partnership in evolution. Think of what our species could accomplish together. The moment of possibility was shattered by urgent alerts echoing through the facility. Naira's scales darkened as she accessed the incoming reports through her neural interface. Word of the pregnancy has leaked, she announced, her voice tight with concern. The Imperial Council is convening an emergency session. Conservative factions are already calling for genetic purification protocols. Harrison's arms tightened around her protectively. What does that mean? It means, Naira replied, her scales shifting to colors of battle readiness, that we must prepare for conflict. There are those who would rather destroy the empire than see it evolve beyond their control. As if sensing the danger, the hybrid child's telepathic presence intensified, linking them even more strongly. In that moment of shared consciousness, both Naira and Harrison knew that their private experiment in evolution had become something far more significant, a catalyst for change that would reshape both their civilizations, whether the empire was ready or not. The time for scientific observation was over. Now they would have to fight for their child's right to exist, for the future of both their species, and for a new understanding of evolution itself. The Imperial Council chamber on Caraxia Prime blazed with hostile energy as Queen Naira faced her accusers. Her pregnancy now visibly altered her form, her scales emanating unprecedented patterns of bioluminescence that reflected the hybrid life growing within her. This abomination cannot be allowed to continue, High Commander Thex declared, his metallic armor gleaming as he addressed the assembled council. Our queen has been compromised by human contamination. The royal bloodline, kept pure for 10,000 generations, now faces corruption from inferior genetics. Naira remained seated on her crystalline throne, one hand resting protectively over her swollen abdomen. Through the enhanced telepathic connection granted by her pregnancy, she could sense both the child's steady presence and Harrison's consciousness in his secured chamber several levels below. You speak of purity, Commander, she responded, her royal resonance cutting through the chamber's chaos. But you understand nothing of true evolution. This child represents not corruption, but advancement. Advancement. Thex scoffed, his scales darkening with contempt. These humans are barely past their stone age. Their bodies are weak, their lives ephemeral, their technology primitive. Yet they achieved in centuries what took us millennia. Naira countered, rising from her throne with fluid grace despite her condition. They adapt, they innovate, they evolve through chaos rather than control. And now, she gestured to her transformed body. They have achieved what our finest geneticists could not. A viable heir to the empire. The chamber erupted in conflicting reactions. Some council members showed signs of intrigue, their scales shifting to colors of scientific curiosity. Others radiated hostility, their ancient prejudices challenged by this unprecedented situation. The law is clear, Thex pressed, activating a holographic display of imperial genetic protocols. Any contamination of the royal bloodline demands immediate purification. The human must be eliminated, and the hybrid. Touch either of them, Naira interrupted, her voice carrying 3,000 years of command. And you will learn why humanity's capacity for warfare impressed me so deeply. Before Thex could respond, emergency alerts blared throughout the chamber. A junior officer burst through the security field, his scales pale with urgency. Multiple fleet signatures detected entering the system, he reported. Warships from the outer colonies, led by Admiral Vrix. They're demanding the Queen's abdication and immediate genetic purification protocols. Naira accessed the tactical data through her neural interface, her enhanced abilities allowing her to process the threat with unprecedented clarity. Through her connection with Harrison, she drew on his military experience, seeing patterns in the fleet movements that her traditional imperial training might have missed. They're not just here to remove me, she announced, watching the tactical display with growing concern. This is a coordinated coup. Vrix means to reshape the empire itself, eliminating not just our child, but any possibility of evolution beyond their controlled parameters. The council chamber descended into chaos as more reports flooded in. Colonial fleets declaring independence, genetic purist factions seizing control of key installations, and most concerning, strikes launched against Earth itself. Your human pet has inspired rebellion across the conquered worlds, Fex declared. Even now, Earth's resistance forces coordinate with colonial separatists. This is the chaos your weakness has unleashed. Through her telepathic link, Naira felt Harrison's urgent response to the news. Earth was vulnerable, its defenses still recovering from the initial conquest. Without immediate intervention, millions would die in Vrix's purification strikes. You mistake adaptation for weakness, Naira replied, her scales shifting to battle-ready configurations. And you forget who shaped this empire's evolution for 3,000 years. With a neural command, she activated emergency protocols throughout the palace complex. Hidden weapon systems emerged from ornamental walls, and loyal guards materialized from quantum shields. I am still your queen, she declared, her voice resonating with power that made the chamber's crystalline architecture vibrate. And I will not allow fear of change to destroy everything we have built. The next hours passed in a blur of tactical decisions and desperate measures. Naira coordinated with loyal fleet elements while simultaneously evacuating key personnel from threatened installations. Through it all, her connection with Harrison provided crucial insights into resistance tactics and adaptive strategy. The outer colonies have fallen to Vrix, her tactical officer reported grimly. Our loyalist forces are outnumbered 3-1. Numbers aren't everything, Naira replied, remembering Harrison's lessons about humanity's history of overcoming superior forces. Have our remaining ships adopt irregular attack patterns. Let them see what we've learned from human warfare. The battle for the Empire's future raged across star systems. Naira's forces, though outnumbered, employed unprecedented tactics that confused and fragmented the rebel fleets. Traditional correction warfare relied on overwhelming force and superior technology. But now, influenced by human strategic principles, loyal ships struck from unexpected vectors, used astronomical phenomena as cover, and demonstrated an adaptability that their opponents couldn't match. Through it all, the hybrid child continued to grow, its developing consciousness linking Naira and Harrison in ever stronger ways. Their shared awareness brought new insights, combining Caraxian technological mastery with human intuitive leaps to create strategies neither species would have conceived alone. But victory remained uncertain. For every tactical success, another colony declared for the purists. For every rebel ship destroyed, 2 more defected from the loyal fleet. And Vrix's forces continued their advance toward Earth, determined to eliminate what they saw as the source of contamination. In her private chambers, during a rare moment of quiet between crises, Naira found herself studying her reflection in the quantum-mirrored walls. Her transformed body, carrying this impossible child, represented everything the Empire had fought against for millennia. Unpredictability, natural evolution, the chaotic beauty of uncontrolled creation. They fear you, Harrison said through their mental link. Not just our child, but what it represents. The possibility that their perfect system isn't the end of evolution, but just another step. Fear leads to hatred, Naira replied, both mentally and aloud. And hatred to destruction. We must find a way to show them another path. As if in response, the child's consciousness flared brightly in their shared awareness, projecting not just thoughts but possibilities. Images of a future where Chiraxian order and human chaos balanced each other, where evolution meant more than just technological advancement or genetic purity. The child is right. Harrison's thoughts merged with hers. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about the next step for both our species. Naira's scales shifted to colors of dawn as new possibilities crystallized in her mind. Then perhaps it's time to stop fighting the old empire, she decided, and start building a new one. The command deck of the Imperial flagship Stellar Dawn hummed with tense energy as Queen Nera coordinated the defense of Earth. Her pregnancy had reached its final stages, her transformed body radiating patterns of light that made the ship's bioorganic walls pulse in sympathy. Admiral Vrix's fleet will reach Earth's orbit in 30 minutes, reported Commander Zena, one of the few high-ranking officers who had remained loyal. Their weapons are configured for planetary sterilization. Through their telepathic bond, Naira felt Harrison's fierce determination mix with her own. Earth represented more than just his homeworld now. It was a symbol of the evolution both their species needed to embrace. "Deploy our forces in Formation Delta," Naira commanded, her royal resonance steady despite the child's increasingly active presence. "Humanity taught us the value of unconventional tactics. Let's show Vrix what we've learned." The battle that followed would be recorded in both human and Caraxian histories as the moment everything changed. Naira's loyalist ships, though outnumbered, moved with unprecedented flexibility, incorporating human strategic principles that confused and fragmented the rebel fleet's rigid formations. But in the midst of the space battle, something unexpected occurred. The hybrid child, perhaps sensing the danger to both its parent species, triggered a massive surge in Naira's telepathic abilities. Suddenly, her consciousness expanded beyond the fleet, beyond the normal limits of Caraxian capability. "Your Majesty," Zena gasped, watching as Naira's scales began to emit light that filled the command deck. "Your neural patterns are evolving." Through the enhanced connection, Naira could sense not just Harrison's thoughts, but the minds of everyone in the system, human and Caraxian alike. More importantly, she could share their experiences, their fears, their hopes. With tremendous effort, she projected these shared perspectives into the minds of Vrix and his followers. They felt the determination of Earth's defenders, the loyalty of her supporters, and most significantly, the potential that lay in their combined evolution. The rebel fleet faltered as their crews experienced this unprecedented connection. For the first time, they truly understood what they had been fighting against, not contamination, but completion. "This is what you fear." Naira's voice resonated through both physical and mental space. "Not the weakening of our species, but its transformation into something greater than we ever imagined." The hybrid child's consciousness joined hers, adding its unique perspective. A vision of future where human creativity and Caraxian order enhanced rather than opposed each other. Through their shared awareness, all witnessed possibilities that neither species could achieve alone. In that moment of collective understanding, the battle stopped. Ships hung motionless in space as their crews processed this new reality. Even Admiral Vrix, the staunchest advocate of genetic purity, could not deny the power of what he experienced. But the moment of revelation was interrupted by urgent medical alerts. The stress of the enhanced telepathic connection had triggered something in Naira's pregnancy. The child was coming. Harrison felt her first contraction through their bond and rushed to the command deck. Protocol forgotten, he reached her just as another wave of pain hit. "The medical bay." He started, but Naira shook her head. "No time," she gasped. "The child chooses now to make its entrance." How very human of it. What followed was unprecedented in Imperial history. On the command deck of a warship, surrounded by the aftermath of battle, the Queen of the Caraxian Empire gave birth to the first natural child her species had seen in millennia. The hybrid infant emerged into a world paused between conflict and transformation. Its scales shimmered with both Caraxian bioluminescence and human warmth, its eyes holding an awareness that transcended both species' understanding. As Naira held their child, her telepathic connection shared the moment with everyone in the system. Humans and Caraxians alike felt the pure potential this new life represented, not a dilution of either species, but the first step toward something greater. Admiral Vrix's ship was the first to power down weapons. Others followed, until the space around Earth fell quiet except for the gentle pulse of ships' engines holding position. "The old empire ends today," Naira declared, her voice carrying both physical and mental resonance as she cradled the newborn. But what we build in its place will be greater than anything we imagined possible. In the months that followed, both civilizations began the complex process of transformation. The Caraxian Empire evolved from a force of conquest into a coalition of mutual advancement. Earth, rather than a conquered world, became the center of a new kind of diplomatic exchange. Research facilities were established to study and enhance the natural genetic compatibility discovered through Naira and Harrison's child. Other human-Caraxian relationships emerged, each contributing to the growing synthesis between the species. 1 year later, Naira stood in the newly constructed Unity Spire, a massive structure that rose from the coast of what had once been neutral territory on Earth. Beside her, Harrison held their child, now a toddler who displayed the best traits of both species. Caraxian intelligence and human adaptability perfectly balanced. Representatives from both civilizations gathered to ratify the Convergence Accords, a new framework for cooperation that would guide their joint evolution. The child, named Aurora to symbolize the dawn of this new era, watched the proceedings with eyes that held both human warmth and Caraxian wisdom. "To think," Harrison said quietly, "all this began because you wanted to study human resilience." Naira's scales shifted to colors of contentment as she watched their daughter reach toward the assembled delegates with natural diplomatic grace. Perhaps that was evolution's plan all along. Our species needed each other, not as conqueror and conquered, but as partners in advancement. As Aurora's growing telepathic abilities connected with the gathered representatives, sharing her unique perspective of unity and potential, Naira felt a deep certainty. This was not the end of either species' story, but the beginning of a new chapter in the evolution of both. Together, they would reach heights neither could have achieved alone. And somewhere in the quantum realm of possibility, the universe itself seemed to pulse with approval at this unexpected but perfect union of order and chaos, strength and adaptability, control and creativity. The future was no longer a carefully planned imperial progression, but an endless horizon of shared potential.